Hello, everyone. I'm Laurel Staples. Lawmakers in Helen are considering several bills to address a decline in the number of volunteer firefighters just as demand grows. And Montana Free Press reporter Zeke Lloyd is following it all closely, and he joins us via Zoom to walk us through some of the bills in Helena to address this. And welcome, Zeke. Thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate that. It's good to be here.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. Based on your research, first, what are some of the reasons behind the decline that we're seeing out there?
Well, it's really hard work, and across rural Montana, we're seeing a lot of people struggle to be able to fight fires like they did maybe when they were younger. And as we see people leaving the cities going to rural areas, a lot of those young people don't necessarily have the skills or the training or the desire to go pick up those firefighting tools when the time arises.
Okay. And this is a statewide problem, right? And how does that compare nationwide?
Well, it's a trend we're seeing around the country. A lot of the rural firefighters I talk to have talked about seeing this in other states, and the impact continues to really show as fires will crop up in really remote areas, whether that's Montana, whether that's Idaho, Wyoming, and you just don't have the people who are around that are able to deal with the problem. So it's something that a lot of places, not only across the Mountain West, but also as we're seeing in California, all along the West Coast, and even broader than that, you really need people who are going to be near the fire, ready to fight it when it starts. And that's really the decline we're seeing. Those folks just aren't there anymore.
So go further into the impacts that rural areas are seeing due to this decline.
So I think what's important to recognize here is just how important it is to get to a fire, especially with Montana's quick fire suppression policy right when it starts. So when a fire starts in a really remote area, if you don't have someone there pretty quick to assess the situation and begin fighting the fire, it's going to grow pretty fast. So Montana works really hard to get people there right away. And a lot of the time, if you don't even have someone there, you might not even know that there's a fire going on, which is going to really hamper a lot of the long-term impact as you try to get people there, paid professional firefighters on the ground in that area. So really from the moment the fire starts, you want to have volunteers showing up, even if they're not going to be able to fight the fire right away, to be able to assess, okay, how many resources are we going to need here? And what's going to be the general statewide reaction to make sure we can deal with this wildfire as it really is.
Okay, so several bills again are before the state legislature, with many focusing on offering tax benefits and employment protection. So go ahead and explain that approach to addressing this, and then we'll go through some of those bills.
Yeah, it's interesting. Talking to lawmakers, I think they really wanted to emphasize that we can't pay volunteer firefighters, or at least in Montana's proud history, volunteer firefighting has been a really important part of the culture of not only rural areas, but across the state and urban and suburban areas as well. So, trying to just offer direct incentives is not something that's on the legislature's agenda. Instead, they're opting for these unique tax benefits that are going to be able to encourage people to pick up the firefighting tools when the time comes. So, we're looking at policies like, for instance, House Bill number 129 is going to offer a income tax break for people who are volunteer firefighters year round. So if that applies to you, you're able to get money off of your income tax bill. And then we also have House Bill 140. And if a first responder or a firefighter is injured in the line of duty, severely injured, or even killed, their family is then eligible for property tax cuts. So those are the two of the big financial incentives just to try to encourage people to participate in volunteer firefighting.
Okay, any other potential solutions in the works?
Yeah, absolutely. So those two have made it out of the House of Representatives. In addition to that, House Bill 128 is a way that the volunteer firefighting force is able to make sure that they're not going to lose their regular day job when they go to fight a fire. So House Bill 128 allows firefighters, when they're applying for a job, to declare that to their employer. An employer then, if that firefighter is not able to attend work for a certain period of time because the firefighter is on a volunteer firefighting event, they cannot be terminated.
Okay, so what about sources of funding to help volunteer fire stations?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're seeing the legislature in general looking to invest more in general firefighting resources. So that absolutely comes in the form of just money that's going to help a lot of different organizations across the firefighting spectrum in Montana. But that includes House Bill 127, which will direct excess funds from the general fund to the state's fire suppression account. So that's going to enable volunteer firefighters as well as paid firefighters when it comes to dealing with fires on the ground.
Okay, so which one of the bills, as you follow the process, seem to be showing the strongest support?
It's a great question. None of them seem to be none of them have faced a lot of opposition as they make their way through the legislature. One of the big concerns I'm hearing from legislators is how much money are we able to spend on this in an effective, efficient way? So we're actually using our resources to improve the firefighting capacity of the state, especially for volunteer firefighters in these regions. So all of them have faced pretty much the same amount of opposition, which is essentially none. Although, as they make their way through the other chamber and out of the House and into the Senate, some of the legislators are concerned that there might be pushback over just how much they cost.
Okay. Any other concerns floating around out there?
Yeah, hearing from rural firefighters or volunteer firefighters across the state, there's a concern that maybe legislation isn't going to be enough to fix the problem. So, folks are concerned that these are good intentions, but what I've heard is they're probably not going to be able to actually shift the current trend, which is a decline in volunteer firefighters.
So they're still looking for more of a permanent solution.
I'd say that's right. And there are questions over whether that can be legislation or whether that might come in the form of just a cultural shift. As you've already talked about, people are moving to rural areas, and a lot of them don't necessarily realize that the standard or the general practice there is that when a fire comes, the whole community gets together to fight it. And so that cultural shift might be the backbone of the problem when we're seeing the decline in volunteer firefighters.
Okay, interesting. And you have a really great article out right now on this. And I know you're going to continue to follow this with update articles. So you mentioned that this is a passion for you. Explain.
That's absolutely right. This summer, I was working at Montana Free Press covering wildfires. And, it's one thing to write about them and call folks who are on the fires and hear about the acreage or hear about the number of people who are working on it. It's another thing. I had the opportunity to drive to a lot of the state's biggest fires this summer. The Remington fire stands out in my mind. It's important to realize in a lot of this state, we have big open areas, and fires are not only able to spread quickly, but it's very unpredictable. The Remington fire, over 190,000 acres, one of the largest in recent Montana history by a pretty huge margin. It didn't look like it was going to be that bad, and I remember talking to volunteer firefighters on the ground when that Remington fire was just a small, small blaze in northern Wyoming, and the wind shifted, and they these volunteer firefighters realized that the blaze was moving north, and the next thing they knew, it was covering a huge chunk of southeastern Montana and absolutely showed no signs of slowing. So these are the people who really understand fire. And what I realized traveling around the state, and one of the things that gives me a huge passion for this issue is its unpredictability. And the fact that people who are going to respond to fires have to be ready for really, truly anything that might happen, whether that's a shift in winds or the fire finding an uphill lane where it can just burn through a lot of sagebrush really fast. And so that kind of unpredictability makes it a really interesting thing to cover. It makes it really difficult for the legislature to find solutions for this growing problem.
Absolutely. Well, we'll continue to follow this. And anything else that you would like to share?
No, this absolutely feels like I've gone through everything, and I really appreciate the chance to come on. So thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much.